Thank you. I have some major concerns with this budget going forward, mostly because I don't think it fits with the vision of what Oro Valley is and what it wants to become. I don't think we're making the proper investment to develop arts, culture, parks, recreation, and the outdoors. I believe Oro Valley is fundamentally changing from a suburb north of Tucson into something much greater, a driver of bioscience, jobs, and a strong, diverse community from young professionals to retirees. Simply put, Oro Valley is becoming a leader. We must continue to lead and develop our assets that make us great. I don't think this budget develops those assets the way we need to in the following areas. Parks and recreation. I was thrilled to see Bloomberg Business Week name Oro Valley the best place to raise kids in Arizona. I don't think we're doing enough to build out this momentum in this budget. Our parks and recreation are woefully inadequate. There is no excuse for this. We market and sell our weather and our outdoor activities. How can we have such undeveloped parks and recreation sitting in our town? I think is unexcusable. The Naranjo plan, I could support if it's actually going to be a feasibility study and get us somewhere, as opposed to another plan sitting on my desk that makes me sigh every time I see it because we're not going to do anything with it. Developing these resources are vital to attracting bioscience and high-tech jobs that we all strive to attract. And we also owe it to our citizens, and specifically the families who are woefully underrepresented demographic of this town when it comes to services, and I think this needs to change. I'm also concerned with this budget vis-a-vis the long-term financial strength of our budget, general fund, going forward. The projected deficit of this year is $1.57 million in the general fund. If you look at the next 5 years out, which would have been item one, but we moved it, we run a deficit in our general fund of over $1 million, $1,057,000. That's a total deficit from this year going forward 5 years of $2.63 million in our general fund. Our contingency reserves were projected this year to be 40.1% of our expenses. At 17-18, it's going down to 28.5% of our expenses. That is a scary number, and I don't like the trend we're seeing in the general fund. As we continue to run deficits, I don't think this council wants to talk effectively, being the key word, about the police department. And I think this is mostly due because it's a difficult discussion because we are Oro Valley, and I actually agree completely with Councilman Snyder. We are different. Our citizens expect a much higher service from our police department than other towns, and I think they're willing to pay for it. From SROs, every time I go to a fair and seeing motorcycle cops that my kids like to ride. My son went on a kindergarten tour yesterday because he's going into kindergarten. He came home with an Oro Valley police sticker. And more importantly, my wife was going with the other parents, and the other parents were raving about how great the SRO program was. And then they didn't quite understand why Coronado didn't have an SRO. My wife had to explain to him whether or not in Oro Valley, it's an Oro Valley benefit, not AmFi. And we're really proud about that. And the list goes on and on. We are different, willing to pay for it. So some comparisons to other towns are appropriate, but it's a very difficult subject because we are Oro Valley and we do lead, and the police department's no different. But staying at the 35,000 or 50,000 foot level, there's a couple things that just strike me as off when I look at that level. In 2005-06, the population of Oro Valley was 40,215. The police budget was 10,302,000. This budget, we're 41,629. Our budget's 14,223. Basically, our population went up 1,000 people, but our police department budget went up 4 million. This kind of gives me pause, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but just looking at that level, that seems kind of out of whack. We're now at 50.5% of our general fund, and going forward with such deficits in the general fund, I do think we need to look and have an effective conversation about the police department and not the tit for tat we tend to go into. The second thing, overtime. In 2011, the actual FTE of the police department was 124.73. 2012, it goes up to 128.21, and this year it's projected to be 134.13. The thing I find interesting is our actual overtime spent last year is 380,000. It's actually 379, but we'll round up to 380. The budget this year is 464,173, an increase of 85,000. Yet our FTEs go up 6. We're hiring 3 reserve officers that Chief Sharp mentioned at the study session was to cut overtime pay. So we added the overtime reserve officers to cut overtime pay, but our overtime pay is 85,000 more than what we spent last year, despite going up 6 FTEs. Again, I think that's something we need to effectively look at. And then Chief Sharp said something I absolutely agree with last time when Councilman Lincoln asked him about whether the evidence storage facility would go through the normal process. I disagreed with it slightly, and I'll explain why. You said when it comes to building buildings, we are good police officers. I'm going to amend that to say we are great police officers, but your point is valid. We hired you to run the police department and ensure we get the best public safety for our dollar. You know who's good at building buildings? Mr. Kiesler and Mr. Williams. I think there are a lot of redundant assets in the town that can be utilized so the police department can focus on public safety. I absolutely do not support reducing officers in any way. I never will. I think it's absolutely in bad faith that we kept these officers through the lean times, not giving them COLA nor step increases, and then we'd lay them off. I would not support that at all. What I would like to do is see the police department Chief Sharp go work directly under Mr. Caton. And this is for several reasons. One, it lets the experts on the town handle administrative tasks of the PD so they can focus on public safety, eliminate some redundancies and efficiencies through IT, fleet, and other things. And four, and I think the most important, it just makes sense. For one, it stops the PD from being a political issue. I'm fed up with the PD being a political issue and cops on the street being used as a political issue. I don't think it helps the town, and I agree with Mr. Tracy that it hurts morale. I don't think this town gets much benefit from this council going back and forth on a tit for tat argument on ancillary issues, take-home car policies, etc. This should be left to Chief Sharp and the town manager to set that policy, and I think it's something that needs to be away from the town council and to the professionals. And I think it protects the PD from the political whims of the council. Elections change. The complexion will change. And I don't think the police department should be a pawn that it might be if left directly under the council. The third and last thing I'm concerned with in the budget is the TEP undergrounding, which is one of the big reasons we have such a shortfall this year of $1.5 million, instead of the $500,000 surplus, which would have been nice to use on some of these requested items. One of the main reasons I voted against giving $2.1 million to TEP because we did not have a way to pay for it. I don't believe it should come from contingency, and I would like to see the final vote on this budget delayed until this council decides an appropriate source to pay back the $2.1 million. And if the majority says contingency, so be it, but I do think we should find another way to pay for that, especially in light of the deficits going forward in the general fund and going down from 40.1% to 28.5%. I would like to see that payment come from somewhere else. Because I think it's just fiscally irresponsible to pay the $2.1 million from contingency when we're facing another $1 million shortfall going forward. I would like to have used that $5 million surplus we should have had for this year, but for the TEP, to do some of the things Councilmember Zinkin mentioned that benefit the citizens. There's actually a dog park in the item 6 for $60,000, so you can save $55,000 off your 115. The water points, I actually only asked for two things in the budget. It was a dog park and the water points on CDO. Both can be done for about 20% of that $500,000. But I'd like to see that $500,000 used to invest in some of the parks and recreation and other items that we need to develop the assets going forward to be a leader in bioscience and attracting the young professionals we need to become the strategic plan that this council implemented. Find a way to pay for the TEP undergrounding and either take an effective look as council at the police department, which I don't think we're going to do a very good job doing, or move the police department under the town manager so we can let the professionals do what they do and get the town council out of meddling into some policy. Thank you.